Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. I do my best to be modest about this podcast, but I have to say, today's episode has pretty much everything that makes this show a joy to listen to and produce. We have an enthusiastic guest who came with plenty to say about herself and the show that she chose, a Phish show that provided plenty of rabbit holes to go down, comparisons between Phish's past and present, and of course, a high-profile guest star that caused a bit of controversy in the Phish community after the show. Today's wonderful guest is Patty Gambill, and the show she chose to discuss is from August 6, 2024 at Van Andel Arena in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This show and the next night were Phish's first shows at the minor league hockey arena since 1998, and an indoor show during the summer tour as well. There were plenty of signs to predict that these would be special shows, but the summer of 2024 seemed to shake something loose in both the bands and the fan base, so it's hard to call any specific show special when almost every show was special. We try to get to the heart of it, but I think that this will be an ongoing conversation for a long while. But enough from me. Let's join Patty to talk about special guests, bluegrass, and more as we discuss August 6, 2024 at Van Andel Arena in Grand Rapids. Patty, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you coming all the way from Colorado?
Excellent. It's a beautiful sunny October day here. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week.
I have too, and it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. It is a beautiful sunny day, October fall day in New York as well, although it feels a little bit more like a summer day, actually. I've got hoping for some more leaves to fall. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the fall. We're actually here to talk about the summer, as you chose Phish's show, a fairly recent show at the time of this recording, August 6th, 2024 at Van Andel Arena in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which was, and we'll get into this, something of a controversial set of shows from last summer. But again, we'll get into it in a little bit. But I'm so happy you picked this show and that I got the chance to listen to it straight through, because I haven't before you brought it up, and I haven't listened to the next night either. So you inspired me to get to listen to two highlight shows of this summer full of highlights.
Well, great to hear it. It was truly a treat. My first time ever seeing a sit-in. Agreed, it is controversial, I believe, amongst the fans, because there are definitely those people that are firmly in the Phish purist camp. I am not one of those. I love to see anything that they want to do. They're the experts, not us. Yeah, so seeing Billy Strings play with Phish was incredible, just incredible.
And we'll get there for sure. But before we get to Billy Strings or sit-ins or anything of that ilk, let's hear about you, Patty, as a fan with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Alrighty.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Patty, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember about it?
My first show was 12/7/97 in Dayton, Ohio. That's actually where I grew up. I had a broken arm at the time. Funny story about how I got to my first show. I was a junior in high school, and I was friends with people listening to Phish, a lot of marching band kids. So I was familiar with them, but never, hadn't been to a show yet. I was supposed to go skiing with a boy that I had a huge crush on. No names mentioned. And a couple days before we were supposed to go skiing, I broke my arm. Couldn't, obviously go on that trip that weekend. I was devastated, thought he'd never speak to me again. A couple weeks later, fast forward, his older sister comes home from college for winter break and had some tickets to see Phish. She took us, and it changed my life. Not just musically, but all of a sudden, those high school problems fade away and you kind of get a glimpse into this whole other world that's out there. Yeah, haven't looked back since.
That's fabulous. I think that show has been covered on Attendance Bias. I'll have to do a double check on that. And also, that makes you and I kind of friendly, I won't use the word adversaries, but the December 7th, 97 show was at the Nutter Center, right? Is that
correct?
The name of the venue?
Yes.
Right. So that is one of the top two versions of Tube ever played. Mm-hmm. And my first show is December 29th, 97 at Madison Square Garden, which vies back and forth for the title of top Tube ever played. So there's two types of people in this world. The tube from December 7th and the tube from the 29th. I guess I could name which one you're in.
Yes, definitely. And it's also one of those shows where I feel like there's times in your Phish career where you can appreciate what's going on in the moment and just how big it is. Like for me, Magnaball was one of those. My very first show, I wish I could go back with the knowledge that I have now and just appreciate the gravity of the playing at the time, of just how special that really was. The Boogie On breakout or bust out, sorry, just all of it was just so good. So good.
I've had that same thought so many times. To quote the Faces, right? I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. If you could take a time machine and go back to your first show as the person you are now, oh my God. Right. But it's made it the top listened show, I'm sure, for decades. That my first show, I'm sure yours, when you got those tapes, you probably listened to it until they were worn out.
Oh, nonstop. I probably still have them somewhere in a box. And also, I mean, that building is just so special. I graduated from high school in that building. My family and I used to go to minor league hockey games at the Nutter Center. The Dayton Bombers used to play there. So lots of history for the Gambill family at the Nutter Center.
Well, go Bombers.
Yes.
What was your most recent show, Patty? And what did you think of it?
Oh, my most recent was Dick's. I live about 15, 20 minutes away. It's always my favorite weekend of the year, sleeping in your own bed after the show. There's nothing like it. And it's just, overall, the playing was out of this world this year. It might have been my favorite run that I've done. So yeah, just overall outstanding. It was not super. I couldn't believe how few people were there for that Thursday show, which is understandable because of Mondegreen being just 10 days prior. But it was just overall amazing as always. It's just an overall wonderful venue. I mean, the staff they're all pros at this point in time. Yes, it's a little hot during the day, but it's, by showtime, it's always, nice and cool, sweatshirt weather afterwards. And just the shenanigans in the lot are the best afterwards. The crowd is all, we're all pros at this point. Everybody has a game plan on getting in there, where your spot's going to be, holding down space for your crew. But everyone on the floor is generally really generous with everything. And I can't say enough about how just how giving the crowd is,
You're making me salivate a little bit. But moving away from Dick's just a bit, we mentioned earlier today's show at Van Andel, we talked about Billy Strings as a sit-in. Other than this sit-in with Billy Strings, whether it's the night of the show, the 6th or the 7th, what has been your favorite guest appearance at a Phish show, whether or not you've been present to see it?
Ooh, my favorite guest appearance. Well, let's see. It's not going to be Kid Rock. Definitely not that one. Probably the Halloween 09 shows with the Dap Kings and Sharon. Oh my God, what is her last name? I'm so sorry. Sharon King, right?
Sharon King and the Dap Kings, yes.
Yeah, Sharon King and the Dap Kings. Why? I'm so sorry about the brain fart. But yeah, that Halloween show was just outstanding. I was not in attendance, but I listened to it regularly.
Best version of Susie Greenberg, I think, that they've ever played, almost entirely because of her.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. My dog that passed away a couple years ago was named Susie Greenberg, specifically for that version.
I can't believe it was that long ago, that A Dog's Lifetime, and my sympathies for your dog, because I do love dogs. But the fact that A Dog's Lifetime could be named after Festival 9, and that by this point we're still living through it, sometimes it feels like it was yesterday, and sometimes you could do the math and realize just how long ago 2009 was.
I mean, we're so fortunate that they're still playing. I mean, who would have guessed when they announced those Hampton shows that they'd still be around 15 years later? I thought for sure that was going to be not a flash in the pan, but that summer tour was such a treat to see them one more time, and then here we are. And this past summer tour was some of the best playing I've ever heard.
I can't wait to get to it. But to continue with the lightning round and the idea of on-stage guests, theoretically, if you could witness any living musician on stage with Phish, who would you pick?
So this question, I definitely had to do some thinking on. My knee-jerk reaction was David Byrne because of how much influence he's had for them. But I don't know how well he would jive with Phish versus Phish with the Talking Heads. So I do love me some Phish with horns. And I think Rebirth Brass Band would be absolutely incredible. Or Herbie Hancock. I think that would really gel well as well.
I think that would break the internet with a certain demographic of Phish fans if
Yeah.
Herbie Hancock came on.
Oh, I'd lose it.
You talked about going to Dick's and everyone having their plan, their setup, kind of everyone has their routine, the ritual, so to
Right.
speak.
Definitely.
So I'm curious, and I think this question tells a lot about any person as a fan. Which role do you play in your Phish crew? So, for example, are you the mom making sure that everyone is on time and remembers everything? Or are you an agent of chaos who shows up late and disappears and then comes back at the encore? Are you the straight arrow who drives home? Or are you the flake who says you'll be there at 7 o'clock and you don't show up till 8:45? Who do you see yourself as a member of your crew?
Well, we definitely have an agent of chaos, but unfortunately, slash fortunately, that is not me. I would say I'm probably the travel agent or mom of the group. I work for the largest hotel company in the world, no names mentioned. So I'm usually the one that makes the hotel reservations. That and yeah, definitely the mom. My nickname is Overprepared Patty. So if you need a Band-Aid or sunscreen or some chapstick, I've got you covered. Like they love to make fun of me and my giant purse, but when you're baking in the sun during the like the day set at Magnaball or waiting in line at Dick's, like your girl's got your 50 SPS.
Do you have Starbursts or candies in that bag?
Always, always. My buddy Chuck and I love the sour lifesavers, the sour gummy lifesavers. I've always got 3 bags of those. Definitely some Sour Patch Kids. Some Twizzlers, for the spun out looks that need some entertainment with their candy.
And might be grinding their teeth, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, I'm like, here, please save these. Save your molars. Eat these. Yeah, and definitely water. When my friends are out here for Dick's, I won't start the car until everybody chugs a bottle of water in front of me.
Oh, wow. You really are the mom, but you're the cool
yes.
mom.
I try. I'm just like, let me save you from yourselves. Please drink this.
So finally, of your years seeing Phish, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
Oh, man, this one took a while. I think I had probably 6 or 7 answers for this. I have a PG version and a not so PG version. The slightly family friendlier one is in 2012. I went to the St. Louis show. It was the end of August, super hot outside, and we were just kind of hanging out outside the venue before the show. And there was a big sports complex outside the arena. And say like 4 or 5 girls softball teams were having practice at the time. There, when they were rotating through their practice stations, we were right in front of the girls that were like practicing their home runs. And there was one girl that was just nailing them. I mean, she got to 5 or 6 in a row, and all of the looks around kind of started to take notice. And like by the time she hit, 7 and 8, everyone was cheering. People were going crazy, like she was in the home run derby. And like her teammates were really kind of looking at us like, what the hell is happening? But she was eating it up and just eating up the attention, going nuts. And I think she made it to like 22 or 23 before she finally missed. But it was like awesome. These girls obviously had no idea who we were, what we were there for. They were just like, what are all these weird people doing watching us like practice hitting? So that was definitely a memorable moment. And then my not so family friendly version is back in like 99, I believe it was. I was at Cincinnati. And
sorry to interrupt you, but it's usually
okay.
the non-family friendly versions almost always take place at the end of 1.0. They're almost always in 99 and 2000.
Yeah, definitely. This was some rowdier times, and I was a different person. So we're at Cincinnati, and this guy goes by in a shopping cart with like a keg of beer. He's just like squirting people with the beer, occasionally like giving a cup out. He goes by some cops and chucks a bottle. And like after he threw the bottle, it was like everyone else started throwing bottles as well. We hightailed it out of there. Well, fast forward to like February or March of 2020, the pandemic had just started. I meet some random guy on like a dating app, went out a couple times, went hiking, really like cool, clean cut, owns a business here in Denver. Come to find out, he's the one that threw that bottle 20 years ago. Like, yeah. So I was dating the bottle throwing riot guy for a while here in Denver.
When was this show played?
All right, Patty, so let's take a look at the summer of 2024. And today's show, just as a reminder, August 6th, 2024 at Van Andel Arena in Grand Rapids. So 2024 started with a bang. If you kind of consider the last 2 minutes of 2023, right? A fully produced Gamehenge, New Year's Eve show. Yeah, when we talk about 2024. I unfairly consider that New Year's Eve show part of the calendar 2024 year, even though it
That checks
isn't.
out. Yeah, I
Right?
think that checks out.
Yeah, it's part of it. So the band played the Gamehenge night at Madison Square Garden. They next played a beautiful Mexico run, probably the four best nights. I mean, because I know Mexico used to be 3 nights, but probably the best overall Mexico run, musically speaking, to date. Four high-profile shows at the Las Vegas Sphere in April before beginning the summer tour proper on July 19th in Great Woods. The band played 3 nights at Great Woods, none of which were sold out, before moving southwest for not southwest of the nation, but southwest of Great Woods for just a 2 spot at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. The tour moved into the Midwest for 3 nights at Alpine Valley, where they really settled in. In my opinion, Alpine Valley is where the tour really got off to a good start. And
So good. Yes.
and I was at Mohegan Sun, and there were highlights for sure, but it didn't feel as good as I felt at the end of the tour, where,
Mhm.
and Alpine Valley, I think, was that turning point, is the phrase I think I'm trying to find.
I
Huge
would absolutely agree
highlights.
with that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. With huge highlights and top marks from fans, especially for A Wave of Hope and My Friend, which became the song of the year, I think you could
Right? Who
say,
knew?
right?
Yes, agreed.
The
Yeah,
next two
who saw that one
shows,
coming?
yeah, since I would say even since the Baker's Dozen, when on Jam Night they played that one amazing version of My Friend. After that, I won't call it forgettable, but it is fairly predictable. It's a fairly
Sure,
structured
very
song.
straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah, but it became a Get Back from the Bathroom When They Start It song,
Yeah,
which it never was
agreed.
before.
Yeah,
So,
agreed. And especially the Dick's version with that crazy ending. Like it, it was very like sing-songy and happy and blissful at the end instead of just the regular life. Yeah, yeah. It was like just
it's
happy all of a sudden.
you never know. 40 years into it, I know My Friend isn't from 1983 or whatever, 84, but 40 years into their career, still finding spots that were never found sooner to break out. And that's why we keep coming
Yeah.
back. That's why my checking account is always borderline.
I can so agree with that. I can definitely understand.
And so the shows after Alpine Valley were at, and please correct me if I'm wrong, since you're more local to the region than I am, 2 shows at Chaffetz Arena in
Hmm.
St. Louis. Is that right?
That is correct. I remember when the rumors for this summer came out, and I was like, no way will they play Alpine, St. Louis, Deer Creek, all in the same summer. It's just not going to happen. And then when
Right.
they the actual tour dates came out, one of my friends had a great idea for a lot shirt, summer 2024, real Midwesty. And yeah, what a dream.
It was great. And I got to tell you, as a Long Island Jew, although I live in the city now, but growing up a Long Island Jew, I thought before someone on this podcast corrected me that it's pronounced Chaifetz Arena, like it's like some Yiddish guy named it. But they played 2 shows at Chaffetz. I don't remember anything about them. I was fairly tuned out of the tour at this point after Alpine Valley because I had some family commitments I had to deal with and pay attention to. I always check the set lists, but I didn't have time to listen back after each show. That's why I never listened to this show, the Van Andel show, until
Sure.
this episode. So I only heard bits and pieces, and a friend of mine on a Phish message board that I frequent described the 3 night run at Deer Creek as, quote, fearless and free.
So good. It was excellent. I wasn't planning on going to those shows at all. And kind of last minute, things worked out with the hotel I worked for. We weren't going to be busy. So I added Saturday and Sunday with my best friend, Bridget. Flew to Indianapolis. She scooped me up at the airport and we went on to Deer Creek. And every time I go back to the Midwest, despite growing up there, the humidity gets me every single time. So,
Yeah, it's awful, especially in June for a summer tour.
yeah. And but I hadn't been to Deer Creek in a while, considering that was like one of my like hometown venues growing up. And I can't say enough about the improvements they've made, not just to the surrounding area, but the actual venue itself. I mean, bathrooms everywhere, virtually no lines, even for the men, and the amount of refreshment stations, beer and alcohol and otherwise. There was like never a line for anything. It was wonderful. Venue definitely gets top marks from me now.
If you had to pick between Alpine Valley and Deer Creek, if you only had the funds, resources, or time for a run at one of those two, which one would you pick?
Oh, I'm going Alpine all day, every day. I love that place. This is the first Alpine run I've missed in many, many years. I love how like dirty and rundown and beautiful and awesome that place is. And like, it's crazy how when you're down there, like just off, the first couple rows off the pit, how you can't even see, you can barely see to the top of the pavilion, let alone the top of the lawn. So I can't imagine what the band must be thinking on stage. Like you can't even see the back of the crowd. It's so steep. It's awesome.
So the tour brings us to tonight, right after Deer Creek, August 6th, 2024, for what happened to be Chris Kuroda's 1800th show with Phish, and the first of two nights. Yeah, and the first of two nights in Grand Rapids. And it was the first time the band played this venue since November 11th, 1998. Were you at those shows?
Right. No, I was not. I was a senior in high school then. And despite my methods for getting away from my parents, before cell phones, they couldn't really figure out where we were. And so I would frequently just tell them, oh, I'm going to visit a college with so-and-so. And they didn't think much of it. They're like, oh, you girls get good grades. Like, yeah, of course that makes sense. You're going to visit a school in New Hampshire or whatever. But for whatever reason, I couldn't get out of school that week. So I missed those shows.
Well, for this show, you have certainly a number of shows to pick from. When you contacted me and we were going back and forth about which show you wanted to talk about, why do you have attendance bias toward this show at Van Andel?
I think everybody has those experiences in their career, their Phish career, where it's like, everything just kind of worked out perfectly. And on top of that, musically, it was just like next level. So I think this was one of my favorite Phish experiences possibly ever, but definitely of the summer. Everything just kind of worked out great. I had a wonderful crew. We had a great spot. Staff was unbelievable. So yeah, just everything gets 5 stars from me for this show.
Set 1.
They open with Strawberry Letter 23, which is a great opener. It sets everyone in a laid-back party mood immediately.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah, it's incredible. And no one would mistake Trey's vocals for Shuggy Otis. They have come a long way since the song debuted at the Baker's Dozen. That was my first thought listening to this. I thought, oh, this could pass for...
Right? Yeah.
like for good vocals.
Yeah. There's no voice cracking on Trey's part. Yeah, they really have done quite a bit to... it used to be the joke of Phish fans, right? Especially back in like the 90s, you don't go to hear them sing, and they almost I don't want to say they took pride in how poor their vocals were, but they definitely weren't stressing about it. And it's cool to see how they've taken it a little more seriously over the years. I think most notably with the David Bowie Halloween show, they really practiced for that.
Yeah, it's always the Halloween shows that bring it out of them. I agree with you. I think that especially in the 90s, like you brought up, that it was kind of it's part and parcel. Like if you were going to listen to Phish, you had to listen to the vocals. Not that they were bad per se, but they weren't with authority most of the time.
No.
And then, when you listen to the fact you brought up the David Bowie Halloween show, my mind automatically goes to the Quadrophenia, the Who Halloween show. And when you listen to the album, the Who album, that is, I would automatically disqualify that from can Phish play this whole album? No way. Roger Daltrey in his prime? No way. But they always found ways around it. And whereas in late 3.0 or 4.0, wherever we are now, with a song like Strawberry Letter 23, they've kind of learned to embrace it and, just like any good professional does, find their weaknesses and practice that the most.
That's a very good point. I never thought about it like that, but you're absolutely right. And especially when they don't have female backup singers. A non-Phish friend and I were listening to that David Bowie Halloween show a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of explaining to him about how Jennifer Hartswick has known Trey for so long that at this point she can kind of make her voice bigger when she knows Trey is going to struggle with the vocals, and she does such a good job of complimenting him when he needs it. But yeah, when it's just Phish, he's kind of up there on his own, and you're right, has found a way to push through the weaker points instead of it being a highlight, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah. And that high note in Strawberry Letter 23, that's kind of the barometer.
Yes.
Was it practiced or not? And it was on this night. Next up is Sigma Oasis. And my first thought was you can't have a stronger sense of style whiplash from like 70s funk and soul to what I always consider Sigma Oasis, like a Steve Miller Band cover. I know it's original,
Okay,
but to me,
sure.
that guitar lick sounds like something that could be off the Best of Steve Miller Band 74, 78 album, you know, the blue album cover with the horse on it.
Right? Yeah.
And and this is a really good version of Sigma Oasis. There's like a synth and organ about 1 minute and 45 seconds.
Hmm.
And this was one point at about 2.5 minutes that was a big point of the summer 2024 summer tour, is that the bridge is almost guided by Mike. And he was huge this
Oh.
summer.
Traversing the seas, Sigma Oasis, alone on a beach, protecting the castle the tides never reached. Am I protecting or breaking an oath? For Sigma Oasis, it's neither and both. You're finally weightless, so take to the air. Sigma Oasis, you're already there.
Yes. Yeah. Very understated but just so strong in the background the entire time. That's a very good point. I also feel like Sigma it kind of sets the tone for the evening as far as jamming goes. It gets that like 2 or 3 spot frequently, kind of like Wolfman's does, where it's like, all right, let's like stretch our legs a little bit and get after it. And, see it really helps them see where the show is going to get to, I guess is the best way to explain it.
I agree. And whatever song goes in that 2 spot, whether it's Sigma Oasis or Wolfman's Brother or Get Back on the Train, right? Or Tube, like
Yeah.
these common 2 hitters.
Yeah.
I agree with you that it kind of gives a hint to the crowd, like this is what you might be in store for this evening. And I noticed that about 6 minutes, there's like a taste of them slipping into a minor key jam, which is something they did repeatedly this tour and beautifully. And then they do go all the way into type 2. This is a relatively short Sigma Oasis. It's about 10 minutes, but there's bass bombs right away. And you could hear it ripple right through the crowd. I mean, you get a Strawberry Letter 23 and then Mike playing bass bombs in minor key to the crowd. You just feel the energy ripple through the audience, especially at an indoor arena, an indoor show.
Yes, and that was one thing I was going to bring up probably during our next tune, but I can't say enough about how pumped this crowd was to have them back in Michigan. Even, I mean, like it's funny because on Cash or Trade there seemed to be tickets available all the way up until the show, but when we got in there, that place was packed and everyone was pumped. It reminded me a lot of the energy at the Dayton shows in 2017. A place that like they hadn't played in a long time, but historically had been awesome. So yeah, the crowd was just so electrified and so stoked to be there.
And is Van Andel similar to the Nutter Center in that like a minor league hockey arena? Is it still used as an event space? Do you know?
I do believe that there is a minor league team that plays there. It is much smaller. It's much bigger than Dayton. Van Andel has the 2 tiers, the 100 level and the 200 level. In Dayton, it's just one tier and then the floor. I think it's like 25, 26 rows in Dayton of actual seats and then a couple boxes. And yeah, then just the floor. So I think it holds like 9,000 people, Dayton does. I'd have to check the facts on how many people Van Andel holds, but it was quite a bit more. However, I did love how at Van Andel, all of the concession stations were being run by the parents of local volleyball teams, band members, stuff like that. I just think that's so great.
Oh, how did you know that? How did you find that out?
Because I remember getting a couple of bottles of water, and you can tell when they're not regular concession employees. Like they're kind of picking through the computers or whatever. And they all had T-shirts on that said the local high school band name. And my sister was in marching band, so my parents definitely did things like this for us when we were in high school. And yeah, I just love to see it. One of the dads at this particular concession stand knew who Phish was and was stoked to like be there, but the moms were all like, "Who are these people? What are they doing here?
Hey, they
Is
tip
that guy
well.
okay?"
We
Yes,
tip well.
we sure do. Yes, and we're very polite for the most part. But you could tell a couple of moms were definitely like, "Oh my God, is that guy? Is he going to be okay over there?" I'm like, "He's fine. It's fine."
Mom's gonna mom.
Yeah, absolutely, as they should, for sure. But
See,
yeah.
You brought up the crowd reaction to the next song after Sigma Oasis. You brought up for Peaches and Regalia. My first note was crowd
so
goes
good.
nuts. What was it like being there?
Yes, electrified. I mean, just hands everywhere. It was so loud. Yeah, my first Peaches since Dayton 2017. Love that tune. It felt like we were going to hear it at some point in time this summer. Like we were due, right? Like you just kind of know it's coming. Now, never in a million years could I have dreamed that I was also going to hear it 2 weeks later at Mondegreen, but it was, I mean, so well played. I don't remember any kind of like flubs or missteps at all. It was really good. And I love how, the crowd's still going nuts at like the 110 mark. And I love that prolonged crowd noise. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, me too. I found some notes that it was the first version since Mexico 2022. So it's been a while. You're right. We were due as a fan base. And I agreed with you also that this one was much more precise than the one a few weeks later at Mondegreen.
And to be fair, I feel like at Mondegreen, they were also having some equipment issues, especially like that first night. It seemed like Trey was really messing with his, like, I don't know if it's his amp behind him, but whatever that giant piece of equipment is behind him, he was really like turning the knobs, messing with it quite a bit. It just didn't seem as relaxed and comfortable and dialed in as they were at Grand Rapids.
They follow up Peaches with Tube, which is a great funky follow up. You're just a tube magnet, I guess.
Oh, love it. Yes. All for a jammed out Tube.
Yeah, me too. Who isn't, right?
Right?
So there's this odd rhythm guitar progression that settles back into the usual Tube funk. And I don't know what I mean by this. I'll have to go back and listen, but I wrote down that the sound spreads a little wider at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which opens the door for a type 2 jam. I don't know if it went all the way there, but I did like a little progression that Trey developed. So this is a really good version of Tube that it's easy to kind of zone out. It must say something that I didn't finish that thought on my notes.
So, I get what you mean at like the 3 minute mark. It did feel a little bit like they didn't know who was going to take the lead. They were waiting for somebody to kind of like step out. But then once it happened, it definitely went places. I wouldn't call it fully type 2. I like this like 1.5 kind of version where if you were just to start the song in the middle, like you just start it up without the lyrics, there's definitely versions where you're like, okay, like this previous Sigma Oasis, for example. Like I didn't feel like it went fully Type 2. You can still hear traces of Sigma Oasis in it, and I feel the same about this tube. But just because a jam is 7 or 8 minutes long doesn't mean it can't go places, and this definitely went places.
Right, and it did dip its toe in the water, the 1.5.
Yeah, 1000%, absolutely.
Which led up to Theme from the Bottom, a great sing-along. You could hear it on the audience recording. There was kind of a noodly and coherent guitar solo from Trey, but to me, my ears always drifted to Paige and Mike. Like they made themselves very apparent, like great complimentary playing, where it seems like about 7 minutes in, no one is standing out, and it reaches this big sudden peak, which Trey started playing rhythm guitar, which to me is always a good sign, because that means he's kind of holding back on the notes and letting the other members of the band take over.
Yeah, and I also feel like that's a very apparent theme throughout the entire summer 2024 tour. Like everybody shone. There was no definite MVP, at least in my book. I just feel like they all played so well together instead of playing over one another. Yeah, it was just beautiful to see, to like to hear that Trey kind of lets Mike and Paige shine on this as well. And I can't say enough about, like, again, the crowd. Everybody was so pumped. Everybody's singing along, hands in the air everywhere. Like everyone had the same energy, and it was just awesome.
And it has nowhere to go. Because I keep having to say this, that to be in an indoor venue in the summer tour, it just feels different, right? When I went to Mohegan Sun, it was a little hot in there, right? They had to work on their HVAC a little bit, but it's still a different feel from when you go outside for it being so beautiful to, it could be, a fall tour or a winter run. The feeling inside, the energy has nowhere to escape. Everyone is just so pumped. Still feeling that Peaches.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And it was very much oh my God, I can't wait to see what's next feeling towards the end of that scene, which, brings us to Stash.
Yeah, it's good tension. Good tension.
Yes, definitely.
Stash, I wrote excellent call. Was my first.
So good.
I write these notes as like stream of consciousness. And my first thought was, this hits the spot.
Perfect placement, in my opinion. Great song placement. Very straightforward beginning, which is, totally fine in my book. I love the lyrics. And then, it gets really quiet around the 5 minute mark.
Yeah, I wrote 5:30.
So different. And for me, that's kind of where it took off as far as like, holy fucking Stash territory.
Yeah, I wrote almost the same exact thing. I wrote gets so quiet at 5 minutes and 30 seconds. And then again, like we talked about earlier, they slip into a minor key snaky jam was my my term of the day at around 7 minutes. And I was hoping they would cook on it for a while. And then, gets very substantial just 40 seconds later with loud, nasty. And then it cuts back a little bit and becomes a little more sharper. The middle of this Stash is a little liquid. And I mean that in a good way. Like it's
Okay.
kind of spacey
Yeah.
out there, but man, it gets loud and nasty at 9 minutes. And I could, I could be a tough customer when it comes to Stash in 3.0, but by the
Yeah.
time they get about 2/3 of the way through, I am all the way in. I'm sold. Big applause too.
Yeah. Oh my God. So yes, I have similar notes at like 6:45. The plucky guitar with Paige complimenting in the background was really like cool and unique. And I can't say enough about how patient they were with this jam. And really, again, a theme of the summer tour, they were very patient with one another. They let things build. There was no ripcords. And sometimes I hate being critical of Phish, but sometimes that patience isn't always there. And you could just feel something really big building. And then what is it, the 9-minute mark? The Trey comes in with that Mutron, like that mechanical effect, and Kuroda just goes off. Like he's got all of the bells and whistles on the light rig going, all the spinners, that really cool effect where like he was lighting up the stage with one color and then doing something different above was going on. I mean, it was all just awesome.
I'm so glad to hear you talk about that because all of my notes and all of my thoughts about all of these shows on this podcast, unless I was there, it's all about the music because I'm just listening to the recording of it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not
yeah.
watching a video. So when I hear the crowd react the way they do, it almost completely slips my mind that, oh yeah, there's arguably one of the best light shows in live music going on at the same time that this good version of Stash is becoming a great version.
Yeah. And then at the 10:30 mark, it almost hits this like extra jam, I wanted to call it. And I remember very vividly. So the first part of the show, I was in section 106. We got really lucky with like lotto tickets. So my buddy Chuck and I were over in 106, which is like the Page side and not directly side stage, but like one off the side stage. And we were both doing the Sun Cobra. Just stop dancing fully. We were both just, doing the Sun Cobra, mouths open. Like, what the hell is happening right now? It was so good.
And then we need a chill out. We need a break. I think everyone does. So the band plays Train Song, which was played at my first show. So I have a soft spot for it. But what stood out to me on this one is that Mike's vocals sound so confident. He used to kind of, well, I don't know about mumble, but he used to not really enunciate the lyrics, but he's belting out this version of Train Song. I can even tell what some of the words are.
Right. I agree. And this very much felt like a troll as well, like a crowd troll, because Billy Strings likes to play Back on the Train, and this would also be a song that you could see him coming out for. So this very much felt like a crowd troll / joke by Phish, which I'm here for it. I love that shit.
You just gave me a very good feeling in my chest while you were talking. Of course, I was listening, but I was simultaneously trying to match, almost like AI, Billy Strings' voice singing Train Song.
Yeah.
And I had a little life just bumped up in my chest.
Yeah. This very much felt, like a joke. And again, we've been hearing these rumors all day. I treat every Phish rumor with a lot of skepticism, because everybody wants to think that they're in the know about what the band's going to do. And I remember earlier checking to see if Billy had any shows that day, and he didn't. And so when they played Train Song, that was my first like internal, like, okay, maybe this really is going to happen. Cause I thought for sure at this point in time that no, there's no way they're going to bring him out. That just seems too obvious, and Phish doesn't do obvious things. So this little troll felt like, okay, all right, I see you. I hear you, Phish. Let's see what happens.
Are you a rumor yenta? Do you spread rumors just because you like doing something? No. Oh, I mean, just for Phish rumors.
Oh no. I definitely am like, yeah. I love the guys that I see Phish with, but a lot they love trying to make conjectures and like think about like, okay, maybe New Year's is going to be this, maybe this is going to happen for Halloween, and I'm like, dude, we're never going to guess. We're never going to guess it in a million years. So just stop wasting your time and breath, like trying to think that you're going to see what they're going to do before they're going to do it. And this was one I was 1,000% wrong on, for sure.
And we're all glad that you were in this case.
Yes.
For the end result.
God. Yes. I was definitely like, no, you guys, this is never going to happen. It's way too obvious. And sure enough, I was wrong.
But we have a lot to go before we even get there. Because after Stash, they play Steam, which is another opportunity to take things out. It doesn't quite break out of the box of Trey's wah-wah tone. Although at the end, like a theme from the bottom, there's like a sudden peak that shows up all of a sudden, and boy, does the crowd get loud on this one.
Yeah,
Maybe is
Steam
it
is not my
Corona
favorite.
still?
Yes, yeah, it's not. Steam's not my favorite. I hate saying that. It's definitely a song that I'll fast forward through, just listening to. If I'm driving the car, just listening to Phish. But at the show, definitely starting to change my mind. Like I enjoy seeing it live now. Yeah, and the lights were exceptional for this version, and I like that like ooh part that they started doing after
Yeah.
like that's new to me at least. I don't remember the earlier versions having that. So I'm like, all right, I think I can change my mind on Steam. It's a lot more fun live these days.
And after that, they played Rift, which I thought was an odd choice. Like a very clean version, and it was well played. It just seemed kind of a little bit like odd man out, but that's just the way I read it.
Really?
Maybe it was time to go to the
Okay.
bathroom. I don't know. Maybe that's how I feel.
Yeah, when I was reading through your notes that you emailed me when you said jukebox set, I was kind of taken aback by that for a second. I didn't know what that quite meant. I agree, it's kind of an odd placement, but again, it was so well played and clean, and I just feel like there's just so much to be said for that because I myself, and I'm sure you have heard some not so hot versions where you're like, oh man, that is a little not even forgettable, but like cringy, especially like see Rosemont 03. That's definitely a version I never want to hear again. But yeah, so to hear them play it so well and so cleanly, and Trey just turned 60. Like that cannot be an easy song to get those hands moving for. So I thought it was great. I loved it.
Then they settle into what I consider to be the highlight of the set, at
Oh,
least. And
so
I
good.
thought that Stash
Yeah.
held that title before, Bathtub
Whew.
Gin.
This gin was one of the highlights of the summer for me. It was so fucking good. And again, it doesn't need to be 20 or 30 minutes long to be an incredible piece of music. This thing got there and like in a hurry.
Yeah, and it was about 15 minutes long, which
Yeah.
a gin with
Yeah.
like a basic jam, that's about standard. That's
Yeah.
about how long they are. But man, there's a lot going on here. Like there's
So much.
kind of quasi plinko jamming, like repeating a single note or a 3-note phrase over and over again. There's a groove that doesn't last long and then loose again. It goes all over the place. And then I realized halfway through listening that one thing I really haven't paid a lot of attention to was Fishman. I don't think we've even said his name yet. This whole
No.
conversation, he kept things steady for this whole time while the whole Bathtub Gin Jam is going kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Very, typical standard build beginning. I like the slow build, like the slow build into the jam. I have some notes about it being like a bluesy build up, very relaxed, no one forcing the lead. Fishman's just in the back there, doing his Phish thing. And then around the 4-minute mark, Page hits a couple of those Halloween sound effects. And I don't know, for me, that was like the catalyst. Around like 5:20, Trey finds this melody with Page, and then at 6:30, Phish like changes up the tempo completely, and it seems like he really joins the party at that point in time.
Yeah, I agree. I even put that same timestamp. I wrote, what does it say that I didn't take notes until 6 minutes and 30 seconds? And the next sentence
Yeah.
was, I love where this is going.
Yep. Very swingy at like the 7-minute mark. It gets real like swingy. Everyone's in sync. And then my notes at 7:48, hose the fuck out. Yeah. And then at 8:30, hell yeah, you can feel it in your entire body. And that was so true. Like the lights were going like nuts. Again, the crowd was into it. There wasn't a single person that wasn't just getting down. Everyone was dancing. It was, yeah, like peak Phish right there.
And to me, everything took off at about 10 minutes. Very exciting stuff. It gets gritty with keeping the tempo, the same momentum. And then tension starts to build about a minute later, a little over a minute later. I wrote, the crowd doesn't know where this is going, and it really feels like a spaceship hurtling through the unknown. And we're in Tweezer Reprise jam territory. By 13 minutes, I wrote, put a fork in me. I'm done at 13 minutes. Sickest rock music you will hear all year, if not ever.
Yeah, I had that 12:49 huge buildup. And again, like it was everything. It was the lights, the crowd, and then an incredibly clean ending, which again, for my entire, my notes on the entire summer, they did a really good job of bringing the jams back together and finishing the song, especially during the Dix run. Like sometimes they can get a little muddy trying to bring things back to the start, but man, they were just on it. And it was like jam, 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 build up, build up, build up, end of gin. And it was like just seamless. It was so good.
My friends at Mondegreen probably got sick of me going around saying to them, they're landing the jams. They're landing the
Yeah.
jams. And
Yes.
that was, to me, between Mike kind of taking over a lot of the jams. And I don't know if it was the sound or his playing or both becoming very prominent. Maybe they had talkback mics with in-ear monitors, being able to kind of coordinate, coming back to the jams, like landing the jams. And a few other components of why I thought the summer 2024 was such a successful year musically, or a successful tour, that the fact that they kept going back to the jams, whether it was Tweezer or in this case Bathtub Gin, it took me back to like 1994, 1993, when they were more focused on of precision and landing it than they were about pushing new boundaries. And that it made me just explode with joy.
Yes, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that was missing for a few years. It would just get kind of muddy and then a ripcord would happen and we'd be on to something new. But this was, landing the jams is a great term for that. And I just appreciated that so much after some, murkier times, I guess you'd say.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
Set 2 opens with Free, and I love that it opens the second set, because Free is always a good opener, and it's not uncommon for it to open a show. But when it opens the second set, there's that part right in the middle that can just go off into anywhere, and I had my fingers crossed listening to this the first time through that this would go there. It bodes well, is another way to say it, I guess. It's had such a peak over the past few years. I don't know. It's a standard great version, this one, with some really killer drum fills caught my attention.
Yeah, and so I guess I have to kind of set the scene here a little bit as well. So like I had mentioned for the first set, we were over right off the stage, my buddy Chuck and I, but we had several other friends in the venue. So we went to visit them in their section, which was like directly back from the stage. So you had a little bit of a better view of the light rig. And it was one of those things, we went over there to chat, didn't keep track of time. All of a sudden the lights go down and it's like, well, fuck, I guess we're here for the rest of the show. And we had an amazing usher. She was really, really cool. She's like, yeah, don't worry about it. You guys can, stick around. So I was kind of chatting her up a little bit. And, she'd never seen Phish before, couldn't say enough about how nice the crowd was. And I mentioned something about Billy. And I was like, oh, are you here for his Halloween show? And she was like, yep. And just started grinning. And she's like, oh, do you think he's going to come out? And I was like, I don't know. It feels like you just told me. Definitely excited to hear those first few notes of Free. It kind of feels like, oh, hell yeah, it's on when they open the second set with that. This particular version wasn't super long. And I know I was speaking a bit about how patient they seemed in the first set. This did feel a bit rushed. And again, I think another indicator to, all right, they're trying to get somewhere for like a third act kind of thing.
I had that same thought the second time I listened to this show, knowing what was coming and what it would sound like. Oh my God. But I thought that this opening Free and also the next song, Sand, which is another song that can go anywhere. And I thought, maybe this will be second song of the set that jams the fuck out. It didn't. But that's not a criticism. It's like pretty chill and laid back, like nothing groundbreaking. It was just marinating the whole time, like similar to Free, just type 1 goodness. And I agree with you to the larger point that they were playing these songs because they were almost not killing time, but they were playing songs, but they know that there was an entree coming. These were appetizers.
Right. That's a very well stated. Those are two songs like, I love 30-minute versions of them, but hearing them play them straightforward is just as great. And then, here they start up Ruby Waves. And that kind of surprised me that it went on as long as it did. It's not my favorite, but I feel like I've been so lucky to see some like real monster versions of it. Alpine, Dayton, even this past Dick's was really, really great. So when they start singing, that's my time to go to the bathroom.
Because she'll be back in time for the good stuff.
Exactly, right, exactly. It's like, all right, perfect. I know I have about 4 minutes and 30 seconds to go do my thing, get back here. And so I did.
And I don't know, tell me if I'm right on this. When it starts on the recording, it sounds like the air is let out of the beginning, like the whole building. It seems like once people realize, oh, it's Ruby Waves, it's not quite a hush, but it's not the same energy that was in the first few songs of the first set. But it always leads to a show highlight, like you just said.
Exactly. And yes, it's this collective sigh. And I am definitely one of those people where it's like, all right, but you go get another beer, get some water, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do, and you're going to be back to the goods.
And yet, this version of Ruby Waves demonstrated so many of the things we've talked about as highlights of 2024, or I keep saying the summer of 2024. It feels like the whole year is one enormous tour for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. The Sphere was like its own thing. It was kind of a one-off. It was like like Mexico. It's its own thing at this point in time. So this was the only real tour in my book.
So around 10 minutes and 12 minutes, that stretch is really what grabbed my attention as this is the 2024 sound. If I had to sum up Phish in this summer tour year in 2 minutes, that would be right around where it is, because there were heavy bass fills, a lively rhythm. Page used new synth sounds that we haven't heard before, synthesizers, very dancey, and you could hear everyone cheering right before it shuts down, almost like an engine revving down. And it gets very abstract and weird, almost like 2.0, but that doesn't last very long. It takes an unexpected turn to this like upbeat, joyous bliss jam for a short while that speeds up before deconstructing, and then it ends on a dime.
Yes, and nobody does the tension release, the peak building better than Phish. Nobody. And this was a perfect example of that. Also, I don't know if you heard this, but it's in listening to the show, it seemed like a lot of the melodies that Trey was finding during the jam, specifically starting at like 9:17 at Ruby Waves, I feel like I heard them a lot at Mondegreen. And like, we'll talk about this more during like MoMA and Everything's Right. But when I re-listened to this show, I was like, wait a minute, there are a lot of like chord progressions / melodies that he revisited at Mondegreen. Did you happen to hear that at all?
Truth be told, this is maybe a sin, but I haven't re-listened to so much of Mondegreen yet.
Okay.
And this was the first time that I heard this show. So I haven't been able to compare them through that lens, but I do know the type of playing that you're talking about. I mean, I was at Mondegreen, and to me, it all kind of sounds very Allman Brothers-esque with a lot of rhythm guitar.
Yeah, yes. I love that Trey is stepping back like that and like almost finding a new, I don't want to say a new role in the band. He's always Trey, but like 97 Trey would have never done that. Just played rhythm guitar in the background. So it's so cool and refreshing to hear a new sound still, like you said, 40 some odd years later.
And it takes us back to the beginning of our conversation where we were talking about how they were in the mid 90s, that they would play these tours that would be like 40 shows long, that they would be like seasonal tours. You know, I know I don't mean just literally like spring, summer, winter, fall, whatever, but it would last a season. It felt like these tours that would
Mhm.
just take forever and crisscross the country, that they would develop these jams that
Yeah,
would show up, like, you know, maybe 5 shows in, and then at the 43rd show, it would be like perfected, and you kind of knew where Harry Hood was going or where Slave to the Traffic Lights jam was going, because they had
sure.
developed it. They were having conversations not only on the bus but also on stage every night, and that's what this sounds like.
Yeah, that is so well put. And not to sound like a person that's living in the past, but
It's okay. This
having the
show's
live,
called Attendance Bias. You're allowed to do that
yeah,
here.
like having the live Phish app is such a privilege, because back in the day when you'd like go to multiple shows in a row or hit a bunch of them in the same tour the same season, you would hear things at like you'd think you'd hear same similar melodies, chord progressions, whatever. But again, how do you really trust your judgment when maybe you're enjoying some kind of other mind altering things, or just like you're young, you don't really know what you're hearing. And so to have the live Phish app and be able to actually like go back and listen and compare things like we can now versus back in the 90s when you'd get tapes from 95 in 97 and it would sound like an entirely new band. And you might have even forgotten that thought by that point in time too. So to be able to have like these soundboard recordings at our fingertips, to be able to like go back and listen and be like, oh yeah, I did hear that. I wasn't just, tripping, or I wasn't just thinking something like.
Well, it's the yin
Yeah,
yang.
it's
It's the
really,
flip side.
yeah,
It's the flip side of immediate criticism that stuff
yeah,
like this brings. That people are saying at the minute that a show ends, or the minute that Ruby Waves ends, and people say, "Oh, well, that wasn't as good as this version," or "That wasn't as
yeah,
good as last night." Not last night, but you know what I mean. Of
right.
instantly recalling from the last couple nights, or the next day going on and criticizing it, having the privilege of being able to listen to it so immediately. People were so quick to
Yes,
criticize, but
yeah,
to your sunnier read, it's so much better that we can recognize these trends and these conversations, these
yeah,
musical conversations day to day. It almost feels like we're on tour, even if you can't even go to a show.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, and the webcasts too. Like, I remember seeing one of their first webcasts in like 97 or 98 on dial-up internet and just thinking it was like the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I'm like, oh my God, I am watching a show live right now in my parents' office. And it was glitching out, but I was having the time of my life. And now we can, if you can't get to a show physically or financially, there's still so many ways to see them and enjoy them and still feel like you're part of something.
Yeah, we're living in the future.
Yeah, for real.
It is. We are here now.
Yeah, we're
But
already there.
yeah, I don't need to add anything to that. And then Harry Hood is played next, with Mike
Yep.
taking over right from the beginning. Of course he does. The whole intro is around his bass. But the jam starts at 6 minutes, and it starts like hundreds of other Harry Hood jams, like very pleasant, very buoyant. Trey and Page like nimbly playing above the rhythm of Mike and Phish. And then a small melody develops again. This might be one that would reappear at Mondegreen at about 7 minutes. And then it revs up again at 9 minutes, with big cheers happening at 12 minutes, which I assume Billy Strings is coming on stage.
Oh, the minute Fishman drops into the drums for Harry Hood, my buddy Brad was like directly to the left of me, and it was like we were reading each other's minds. We looked at one another and we're like, oh, this is the end of the Phish set, and something
Right.
new is about to start. Like,
Right. They're
you just
closing
kind of
this.
know.
They're closing the Phish
Yeah,
portion of the set.
correct. Yes, 1000%. Yeah. But it was
And
still it was a beautiful version. I always want to hear Harry Hood. I always want to hear Free. I always want to hear Sand. So even though it was a little bit shorter than normal, like, who doesn't love it? It's still, you're still eating pizza.
right. It's too much of a good thing.
Exactly.
And the banter, Trey introduces Billy Strings. He says, "Here's a friend of ours, a local musician. You may know this guy."
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, the place went nuts. The welcome that he received still makes me like get tears in my eyes. Like everyone was so excited that he was there, myself included. I can't remember the last time I've heard Trey's so excited about a new up and coming musician. You know, like sometimes in interviews on Sirius or whatever, he'll talk about some abstract band that he's really into from Brazil. And that's wonderful and great. But like, we're never going to see them on stage with Trey. And the bond that he and Billy share over sobriety, over just, you know, being musicians in general. And I think Trey really enjoys being kind of a mentor to him. It was just really cool to feel that on stage. I've only been privileged enough to see one show of his, like with his own band. I've seen him with Billy and the Kids. I saw him play with String Cheese at Red Rocks a couple of years ago. But goddamn, does that kid have something going for sure?
And he shows what he's got going because they open up this segment of the show with the Moment Dance, which is, in my opinion, a warm-up choice. It's, you know, one of those songs that you would play in the 2 spot in the first set. It's slow, it's funky, it's groovy. You know, they can kind of ease into it. And I wasn't sure if they were singing in a higher register, or maybe this is something that's new, that Trey is singing the lead instead of Fishman. I don't know.
Yeah. No, good point. Yes, I did notice that Trey sang lead on the first verse, but not the second verse. Yeah. Also, when I listened to it on the live Phish app, it seemed a little muddy at first, despite being a soundboard recording. So I listened to it on YouTube and watched the video again, and it didn't sound nearly as muddy. So I think it might just be a little something going on with like a glitch in the app for those of you listening at home that are gonna go, you know, check it out for yourselves. But yeah, it definitely sounded like they needed a minute or two to like kind of figure one another out. But at the show, I didn't notice that at all. I was just grinning from ear to ear. And like, again, the crowd was into it. Everyone was singing along. Everyone was dancing, hands in the air everywhere. You know, at 6:15, there's a little bit of a rough jump into the jam portion, but who cares? And then at 8:40, it feels like the type 2 jam begins. And it's very evident at 10 minutes, you know, guitars not playing exactly together, but like the complementing each other so well. There were so many notes and it just sounded so perfect.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same timestamps, but the big picture is that I agree with you that it makes, first of all, it's hard to deny that when a guest is someone who energizes and excites Trey, it makes the whole band better. You know, you mentioned that Billy String is like younger and still up and coming. Previous guests who have been on stage with Phish, I might miss one or two, but the ones that come to mind were Dave Matthews in Mexico a couple of years ago. I know Derek Trucks. What was it, 2 years ago or 1 year ago that Derek Trucks played an amazing set? What was it, 2018 when Bob Weir? Like, these are established musicians who have success completely on their own. But to have Billy Strings come on, and he is also successful on his own, but he's not as well known as those other guys, certainly not. And it makes the whole band sound better when you could tell that Trey's excited. It just glitters over the rest of the band. And it's not always easy because I use audience recordings for this podcast. And it wasn't always easy at the beginning, the muddy part that you mentioned, who was playing what. Like, it wasn't easy to hear two distinct guitars, but it started coming through. What did you say, like 10 minutes, I think?
About that, yeah. You could definitely hear who was playing lead and who was like kind of stepping back. But then I feel like at 10 minutes, they were both playing like they were both playing lead together, I guess is the best way to describe it. But not stepping on one another at all. Yeah, that's a great term, link up for sure.
Yeah, as I said, it may as well be the Allman Brothers or Lynyrd Skynyrd. Like, it really had that feeling with some laid back rock a little bit later. And they were mimicking each other eventually, like not necessarily call and response, but someone, I couldn't tell which guitar was which for the moment dance, but one guitar was playing one riff and then the other would join in and echo it like right away. And it
Yeah, it was
reminded
so
me,
cool.
yeah, it reminded me in the early 2000s when Trey would play on stage with Warren Haynes very frequently.
Okay. I'll have to revisit those shows. I completely forgot about that until you just mentioned it. Yeah.
Well, it might have been. I'm actually thinking of a Tab show, not a Phish show
Okay.
per se. But there's one I'll have to double check in the fact check. But there's a show that they played at Jones Beach that Trey Anastasio band did. Warren Haynes came on, and Trey just started playing this riff, and Warren Haynes played the end of it. It was like they were literally, they say with the cheesy joke with couples, we finish each other's sentences. It was like that,
Okay.
but musically speaking, and that's what this reminded
Yeah.
me of.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Um, my friend and I talked about this after the show. Phish has been together for 40 plus years. And when you think about the hours that these men have spent playing music together, not just on stage, but the practicing in the bus, whatever. And then here comes this kid, and it was just seamless. He just fit in so well. There was no stepping on anybody's toes. I was not at those stack shows with Derek Trucks, but in listening to them, it seemed like it took a minute to kind of, I don't know, find his groove. Maybe it was the song selection, whatever, but it did not feel like Billy was an outsider at all. Like, I think when I heard about Billy coming on stage, or heard the rumors about Billy playing with them, I thought it was going to be very straightforward. Like, oh, they're going to play Back on the Train and maybe some, stuff that Billy's played with his own band before. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I was going to hear like a 24-minute MoMA.
Yeah,
To
that
start.
word straightforward that you just used. There is nothing straightforward about this
No,
MOBA dance. It gets
no.
very psychedelic at about
Yeah.
15 and a half minutes. I wrote
Yeah.
that 18 minutes, very chill. And I put a bunch of periods and I said, maybe Jerry-like question mark.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then a little bit later, toward the end, closer to the end, like 21 minutes, 22, I might be hearing Throwing Stones somewhere in there. There is this big guitar, like rhythm,
Oh,
strong. I'm just spewing words out there now, but it's because it's bigger than words. But it's just
yeah.
heavy rocking. To me, Throwing Stones is what came to mind both the first time and then again when I re-listened to it. And then they find their way back to MoMA dance. Again, like you said, they stick the landing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think from like 17 minutes on, my notes are this must be what the afterlife feels like.
Yes.
It's just so happy and blissful, and like I just can't describe the joy I felt in my entire body. Corona was doing this like really cool, like rolling wave thing with the light rig. And from like our new vantage point, the reason I brought that up at Step Break, because we couldn't really see this being off to the side stage. It was like the way he was using the light rig, it just seemed like this like wave. It was so cool. And I was so awestruck at the time from 17 minutes until the end. I was just like, God damn, we are so fucking lucky. It's unbelievable.
And it just started. It was the first song.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next one is Possum, which is a perfect choice, stylistically speaking, with an expedited intro, right? Normally, the Possum intro could be a whole minute and a half, just the nope. This is just get into the song with Billy Strings taking lead vocals. Like, this must be a dream come true for him.
Oh my God, it was so fun. And I guess this one wasn't that surprising since he played it with Tab a couple of years ago, when Goose was on tour with Tab. And Mike's face when Billy starts singing, like, you never see Mike smile, let alone grin. And like, he was so stoked to hear Billy sing it. And like, not just like he puts his own spin on it, and then also does this, like, I can't even describe it, this cool thing with the guitar, like makes it his own during like the chorus too, which I thought was really cool, and plays lead on the solo. So this kid's just like doing it all during Possum.
Right, and it's Mike's song, not Mike's song, but Possum is a Mike song. Even Jeff Holdsworth also, but Billy Strings doesn't try to sound like, he doesn't try to sing it like Mike. He's himself, you know, and Trey always says, and other musicians have said it, the hardest thing to do as a musician is to sound like yourself. And it sounds like Billy Strings is a good heads up on that one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like there's so many people these days trying to find like the next Phish, and I'm like, there's never going to be another Phish. Just enjoy it for what it is. You know, Billy has such a unique sound. He doesn't have to be anybody but himself, and that's awesome.
And to close the set, they play Everything's Right, which I first thought is kind of an interesting choice. Like, no, really? I don't know how this is going to fit in, because we just heard Possum, this kind of rockabilly, country-ish song that is right in his wheelhouse. Right? It is exactly right for Billy Strings, but Everything's Right is kind of a new age dad rock song. And I don't know how it was going to play. And I don't know if it's confirmation bias, but it sounded like things got a little quieter when they started it.
Just like Ruby Waves, I feel like you got to have faith, right? Like, when's the last time I heard Everything's Right that didn't have a monster jam? You know, agreed. When the song first came out, 8 years ago, something like that, it was kind of like, nah. But it always results in something fucking awesome. And since Billy and Trey are sobriety buddies, I can't help but think that maybe this was discussed beforehand. Not to sound all hippy dippy, but I feel like there's things in this universe that kind of that give us a glimpse into like a higher plane, right? Like the relationship I've had with my horses and dogs, or maybe some sights I've seen in nature here in Colorado. And I feel like the end of this jam was definitely one of those like insights into there being something else out there, like a higher power, another plane, whatever. it was just so moving and powerful to me that, again, I think that's one of the reasons I chose this show for your podcast.
I agree 100%. You know, when I think of spiritually moving experiences, the first that came to mind as you were speaking was 2 years ago on my honeymoon. My wife and I went to Alaska, and we went to Denali National Park. And
amazing.
for anyone who knows about it or has been there, right, Denali is so enormous. It's so huge. Like, the national park is like the size of Massachusetts, but the mountain itself creates its own weather system. It's so big.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cloudy the 2 days we were there, so we did not get to see the mountain. But we splurged a little because it was our honeymoon, and we took a train from Denali back to Anchorage. And on the way back, the weather cleared, and you were able to see from the train Denali, the mountain, right? Mount McKinley, formerly. And it was just this feeling of, this is the largest object I'll ever see in my life. I felt very small all of a sudden. It's almost like going to the gorge, right? You feel very small when you first get there. And I could see this jam. I don't want to timestamp it because it's not really about that, but toward the end, especially, right? Once the na, 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 that's when I think the heads start to turn. Mm-hmm. And especially toward the end, though, I just said, more, give me more, more. Peak of the show.
Yeah. It's hard to put in the words, right? Like you were saying, like, seeing that mountain that, like, you know it's there, but you weren't able to see it. And then all of a sudden the fog clears, the cloud clears, and it's like, holy shit, man, how has this been here all along? Like, how are we so lucky to be in the right place at the right time to witness this incredible feat? And it's just one of those things where, like, man, I am so fortunate to be alive right now.
And the encore, believe it or not, it's hard to top that, by the way, that everything's right, real hard.
Yeah.
But there's a small, not that small, but a small part of me, a little Phish nerd, like the song Driver, like, lives inside my head. Mm-hmm. There's a small Phish nerd that lives full-time, rent-free in my head, that loves bluegrass Phish. And to hear Billy String's vocals over Nellie Kane and Beauty of My Dreams kind of changed the way that I'm going to listen to these songs forevermore.
Oh, my heart. Yes. 1000%. Yeah. It was, as soon as Trey picked up that acoustic guitar, I was like, oh, it's on. I mean, I haven't heard either of those songs since the Halloween run in 2018. So they start that off. You can tell how excited they are. You know, Trey smiling ear to ear. What is it? I think it's Nellie Kane, when after the first verse, Billy's kind of like, get it, Trey. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I thought, can you imagine a full tour of this? Or like one acoustic, one electric set kind of tour?
Oh, yes. Oh my God, like the Giant Country Horns tour. Who wouldn't want to see, Billy come out for the entire second set every show for a whole tour? I would be beside myself. But my only stipulation is that Mike would have to bring his stand-up bass. My only request.
Oh, of course. And then Beauty of My Dreams, the intro, when they did the picking, the finger picking, my first thought was, well, shit, I know who's on lead acoustic and who isn't. Yep. No offense, Trey. Yeah. But man, they were having a great time. And to close the whole show, I thought it would be over, by the way, after Beauty of My Dreams. I wasn't looking at the set list as I was listening to the show, or I thought they would play a third acoustic song and make it like a 3-song suite of acoustic bluegrass. But nope, they play Carini.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nobody saw this one coming. Yeah, they plugged in. They put their acoustic guitars down. Trey's guitar tech comes back on stage. Everyone's like, what are they doing? What are they doing? The crowd's like wanting more. Yeah, the smile on Trey's face was just like undeniable. It was as big as Michigan itself. And so they started that opening riff. And while Trey's singing, I thought the most endearing thing throughout the entire song was that like Billy was, playing along, right? And like he was singing to himself like a fan does, where you're like, you're not singing he wasn't singing into the mic. He was just like singing parts of every verse like to himself while he's playing his guitar. And I'm like, God damn, this kid must be in heaven right now.
Yeah, well, you think about it, and we touched on this a lot earlier, so I won't take too much time on it. But when you think about time, right? So Billy Strings is in his late 20s, I'm guessing. Probably
32. He just turned 32.
All right.
Yeah.
So he's all right, early 30s. It's been 20 years since Phish broke up. At Coventry. So if you were into them before they broke up, you've had 20 years to sing these songs to yourself. Like if you first discovered them, right, on that last summer tour in 2004, you've had 20 years worth of, not quite 20 years of new music, but close to it, and also digging back into those archives of those tapes we used to collect, right? So someone like Billy Strings, who obviously looks up to Phish as his heroes, you'll be singing Carini to yourself, even if you're in the audience. He just happens to be on stage.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I don't even have words for it. It was so endearing and awesome. And it's like, oh, this kid's one of us. And I remember reading later on that his first show ever was those the Nashville shows that you referenced earlier with Bob Weir. It's the first time we ever saw Phish. And I think he was still in the throes of like using, but man, can you imagine like that being your first show and now you're like playing on stage in front of a sold out crowd, or not a sold out crowd, but a giant crowd in your hometown. And Trey is essentially your sponsor. Like, incredible.
Right. And he wrote such a beautiful note a couple days later about thanking Phish. Well, let me ask you, did you go to the next night?
I did, yes. And at that point in time, I remember that morning just feeling so lucky. And then one of my friends had gone out to breakfast and was like, hey, Billy's tour bus is still parked behind a Andel Arena. And another reason I, had such a great time at these shows, our hotel was right next to the arena. We never had to drive anywhere. We could walk everywhere, which is my favorite. We ran into Paige at the coffee shop that morning too. And we were just like, thank you for such an incredible show. And he's like, my pleasure. I thought I was so lucky to see Billy play with them one night. So the fact that like he came out the next night as well and played even more was just like such a treat.
What was the highlight of that next night, in a sentence or two? If I only had 20 minutes to listen to something from the next night, what would you recommend?
Wolfman's into Death Don't Hurt Very Long. It's a very unique version of Death Don't Hurt Very Long. Not your typical, not the way they've ever played it before. Very bluesy and awesome. Yeah.
All right, well, Patty Gambill, thank you so much for taking the time, for coming so prepared. Oh my God. It's like our notes, like we're completely, if not in sync, at least pound for pound. So thank you so much for reaching out, for picking such a great show, and for really taking an hour plus of your beautiful Colorado afternoon to talk about this show, August 6th, 2024 at Van Andel Arena in Grand Rapids.
Oh, it was truly my pleasure, and I hope our paths cross again.
And that's it for today's conversation with Patty Gambill. And there was a whole bunch we got right, but we did go down quite a few rabbit holes. So let's double check and make sure we got it all right.
Attendance bias fact check.
Patty's first show, the legendary December 7th, 97 show at the Nutter Center in Dayton, has been covered on Attendance Bias. It was the choice of guest Eric Creighton, and that episode aired on June 1st, 2022. I can't believe that neither Patty nor I could get it right in the moment, but she referenced Sharon Jones, not Sharon King, as her favorite sit-in ever. I am very embarrassed, and my apologies out to everyone listening, to Sharon, rest in peace, and to the entire rest of the universe in perpetuity. The St. Louis show where Patty and other fans cheered on the girls during batting practice was on August 28, 2012 at Chaffetz Arena. The Cincinnati show where the guy threw a bottle at some cops was on December 4th, 1999. If I remember correctly, that caused several venues to increase police presence outside Phish shows later on that tour. I remember because when I saw Phish in Hartford on December 12th of 1999, it was heavy-duty security outside pre-show. The David Bowie Halloween show that Patty references several times was on October 31st, 2016, when Phish covered the entirety of The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars for their middle cover set during the show. Van Andel Arena is absolutely still an active event space. It hosts events such as the Barnum and Bailey Circus, and at the time of this recording, there are upcoming concerts from Stevie Wonder and REO Speedwagon. The Grand Rapids Griffins, a minor league hockey team, and the Grand Rapids Gold of the NBA G League also call the arena their home. According to the venue's website, the capacity of Van Andel Arena is, quote, 12,000 plus, because the capacity changes depending on the seating setup for each event. The specific time that I was thinking of Trey and Warren Haynes jamming together and echoing each other's playing on guitar was a show on August 6, 2005 at Jones Beach. For that show, Government Mule opened for the Trey Anastasio Band. Warren came on and played toward the end of the tab set for Push On Till the Day. And finally, at the time of this recording, Billy Strings is 32 years old. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Patty for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, the Mockingbird Foundation for everything it does to help children's music education, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, you could please support the show by leaving a rating and a review of it on your favorite podcast app. You can also follow Attendance Bias on social media or go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate anything you can. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.